Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from wherever you're watching. So we're doing an episode here after a while, and we're so glad that we could continue doing this series because we've seen just a lot of interest in these conversations that we're having. I'm Twain Taylor, editor at amazic.com. And if you want to check out more interviews like this, head over to amazic.com/videos. We've got all of our interviews there, along with other stuff as well. There's event coverage, etc. So the KubeCons that are coming up and all of that will be covered over there. So definitely head over to amazic.com to get your dose of tech. And we have with us today Shani Shoham, that's his name, and he is the Chief Operating Officer, COO of Kubiya. So Kubiya is a new startup that's doing some really cool stuff that we're going to talk about today. And I'm sure a bunch of the stuff you probably never heard of happening in this space anywhere else. So we're bringing you some really cool stuff today. Shani, thanks so much for joining us. It's great to have you here.
Thanks for inviting me. Glad to be here.
All right, Shani. So I wanted to spend just next few minutes talking a bit about the idea behind Kubiya and then getting into Kubiya. So if you could start us off with kind of the idea and the background of how Kubiya got started, how it all got started, that'd be a great place for us to start.
Sure. So like many ideas, it got started during COVID time. So our CTO Shaked was managing the DevOps for one of the unicorns, and just like many other DevOps people probably in the audience, he found himself and his team consumed with requests that were coming at random times, disrupting his day, requiring to context switch, and many times coming off at like all kinds of weird hours in the day. And so one day he got tired with that, and he said, okay, let me try and create some kind of interface that it will look like it's me, but essentially it's going to be an automated interface, and that will be able to converse with my end users. And that's how Kubiya got started. And then again, the idea, the same pain point, replicates across many other companies. And so that's kind of where he saw the opportunity to generalize that and make it available to other companies as well.
Mm-hmm. So I'm kind of thinking of the on-call engineer here, the guy who is up at night and, doing the graveyard shift, covering for the team and just making sure that everything stays up, stays available. I'm thinking of that guy. So is Kubiya kind of like a gift for the on-call engineer? Would you say that?
Yeah, it definitely is. I'm kind of imagining, and I actually saw that on my LinkedIn a few months ago. One of the DevOps engineer on the way to work, there was like some production issue, and he stopped in the middle of the street, opened his laptop, on top of his trash bin, and on top of a trash bin, and just started, connecting through his hotspot, trying to get something resolved. So it definitely is, from two perspectives. First of all, Kubiya eliminates over 80% of the request, and so he's gonna get much less toll than what he's experiencing today. The second thing is, if it's over your Slack or your chat app, then you can essentially just use your phone to trigger complex workflows, and so it's definitely a blessing for them.
All right. So you teased us there with some of the key ideas behind Kubiya. You said Slack. So I've seen the product in action myself, and I thought it was really, really cool. But for someone who's never heard of Kubiya before this, how would you explain Kubiya in like a minute or two?
So I would say, it's very trendy to use ChatGPT, but we've been doing that way before ChatGPT was released. And so we used to call it, Siri, because that was the closest one. But essentially, think about like a ChatGPT like assistant for DevOps. And so as you as the end user, the developer, the QA person, the data scientist, you just converse over Slack, over Microsoft Teams, and state what you want to do, and Kubiya will understand the context of what you want to do. I think, a couple of differences versus just a regular ChatGPT. First of all, it's bi-directional, and so you're asking it to do something, it can ask you questions in order to better understand what you want to do, and do that in a way that's very accessible. So you can just click on certain things, and it will give you certain options to choose from. Two, it integrates with your engineering platforms and aware of them. And so if you're asking for something like restart my ECS cluster, then it knows how to connect to your AWS account and pull a list of clusters. And then when you choose a cluster, it knows what services are running on top of that specific cluster. So again, it's aware of the engineering platforms that you're running. And then the third thing is it's permission aware. And so you can actually create policies in terms of who has access to what. Maybe you don't want a junior engineer to be able to restart clusters in production, but you want your senior engineers to be able to do that. Kubiya can also manage TTL. So if someone has a shift and you want to give him access to certain services or certain actions just for that specific shift, or for a specific action that he needs to do in a given time, then you can do that. So that's, and then lastly, since I mentioned it's running over your communication platform, then we're leveraging a lot of the utilities that already exist. So things like being able to start a one-on-one conversation with someone that's asking for permission, being able to identify the user, being able to hand over a certain part of the conversation to someone else because I'm not sure what the answer is, and those sort of things.
Wow, really cool stuff. I think there's so much that we can go into there. But ChatGPT, it kind of has this huge database of information that it crawls, and it's up to 2021 and can pretty much answer anything from that time period before 2021 and goes way back. So similar to that, what does Kubiya know? What does Kubiya not have a better word, crawl? Does it know your cloud infrastructure? How does it know? What's the process? How does Kubiya figure this out?
Yeah, so first of all, Kubiya can do things like provision and terminate any cloud resources, do database seeding, trigger CI jobs, kill CI jobs, get logs from any system that has an API or an SDK, access your Kubernetes cluster, rename namespaces, kill namespaces, again, get logs, create configuration file, give people access to certain repos. And so pretty much everything that a DevOps person does on his day-to-day job. We can also do that on triggered by a conversation, but also triggered by a webhook or using a cron job. And so I can make sure that every 8 a.m. I get an environment up and running, so that by the time I get to the office, the environment is already available. I can, auto scale different things. I can make sure that I get notification into a channel as soon as a certain event is happening. And so we actually have customers that use that to get logs and even interpret the logs for them as soon as a CI job fails or something like that. So these are just some of the things that Kubiya can do. And essentially, like I mentioned, we can integrate with any third-party tool that has an API or an SDK. We've actually 3 weeks ago we had a case where someone created an IDP, an internal developer platform, but the developer had to use very rigid APIs. And so essentially with Kubiya, we wrapped the IDP and now the users just converse over Slack, and we know what actions to trigger inside the IDP.
Wow, sounds awesome. I think it sounds even more powerful than something like a ChatGPT, because that just gives you information to a question that you ask it. But then here, Kubiya is actually doing stuff on your behalf, stuff that you want to get done. And I think that's more powerful than just sending out information. So really, really powerful stuff. And yeah,
just you raise a great point that ChatGPT is great for generic questions, but to do something that's domain specific, to know all the nuances of DevOps, and again, to also know the organizational context. And I think that's important, because one of the things I find talking to customers is each one of them wants the workflow to be a little bit different. Each one of them has different configuration files, and so you need to be aware of the specific configuration file. And then they want to make certain parameters accessible but not others, and then they want some of those parameters to be automatically assigned based on a certain selection. Do you want an environment for dev or staging? Based on that, they will create a certain, under the hood, they will create a certain image or certain security policy, or maybe associate a user to a specific security group based on his role. I mean, these are things that, regular ChatGPT doesn't know how to do. And so this is where something like Kubiya, that's aware of your engineering platform, and you're able to customize the workflow, becomes very handy.
Yeah, and I think, people spend hours and hours doing this stuff, because there's so much to configure, so many details, so many people's input to get. And it's just such a, it's full of bottlenecks, the whole process. It's a real pain. And it takes ages to get simple stuff done, typically in large companies, But I think with something like Kubiya, where everything is clearly defined and streamlined, I think it makes it so much faster, because, in a single chat interface in Slack, you can send one, 2 or 3 line message, and you can have a very specific resource spun up with exactly the configurations that you need and the permissions that you wanted to have. Right. I think that's really powerful, right? The speed it enables.
Yeah, and you mentioned, what you just said brings up 2 great points. So, first of all, going back to your other question, when Kubiya is set up for an organization, it already comes with a lot of pre-built integration and workflows, and so things like I don't know, getting information around your security groups, being able to provision IAM users, ECR, ECS, EC2, S3, Jenkins, GitHub Action. I mean, a lot of these basic workflow, Kubernetes, a lot of these basic workflows would already exist, which is a big benefit, because they're already automated, and you can pretty much get going from day one. And then the other thing, which I'm sure we're going to talk about some more, but if you need to create additional workflows, then we actually have generative AI, or what we call prompt engineering, that allows you to just describe, hey, I want to create a workflow that triggers a new Lambda, and that workflow will ask for the region to deploy the Lambda on. And essentially in 30 seconds, we're able to create a workflow that you can then customize and test, etc. But then the ability to create a workflow that's automated, is reduced to literally 4 or 5 minutes. And so think how many additional organization-specific workflows you can create in an hour or 2.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a really powerful feature that I saw in action recently. I think it's just very recently launched, just recently, as in Feb, just this month.
Yeah.
And I saw it in action. It really blew my mind. I mean, just, you could, spin up an EC2 or an ECS cluster, an EC2 instance or an ECS cluster, but with such detailed configuration. And you can take something that's already, a template, and you can easily customize it, spin it up, and then make further customizations. It was really cool. It was just like it took less than a minute to do something like that. And so that's really fast.
Yeah, and all of that is happening on top of your existing communication channel. So there's no ramp up to learn a new tool. There's no, you have to keep in your bookmark, access to another platform and kind of go back and forth. I mean, it's all inside your Slack, which is where you probably spend most of your day as an engineer. So,
yeah. And so, you mentioned internal developer platform. So that's, I think, a key idea that's being talked about in the space a lot. And so that means there's two sides to this. There's the application development team, and then there's the platform engineering team. And so, I guess if it comes to Kubiya, the way Kubiya has designed it is that the developers use the Slack interface, and the platform engineers use the Kubiya interface where they create workflows. I don't know if I'm getting this all right, but if you kind of shed some more light on this, the internal developer platform experience and how it differs for the developer versus the platform operator.
Yeah, so the developer would generally just, converse over Slack and say, I want to create a new environment. By the way, one of the nice things is we can teach Kubiya new things. So for example, I can teach Kubiya that for one organization, an environment is an EC2, for another one, it's some kind of configuration file. And typically when I show that to people, I actually show them how I teach Kubi, to learn Spanish. And so I actually ask for an environment in Spanish. But this is wow. Kind of the end user interface. I'll come back to that in a second because there's a new nuance that we're about to introduce. But from the operator side, we have, first of all, permissions and things like that are still managed under Slack. And so if I'm a developer and I want to do something and I have my senior developer working with me and I want to get access to something, I just ask for that permission, and the admins of the system will get notification over Slack. Creating workflows, you can either create workflows using code. We have a YAML-based DSL, or you can do that for our web app. And so the web app is a very easy to use drag and drop application where you can, there's a list of common actions and common functionalities, and you could just say, I want to start a workflow that's webhook based, and the workflow will get these parameters, and then I want to pass these parameters and do some kind of condition and call, whatever action on whatever system it is. And so and the nice thing is you can easily debug that because you can play each and every action and see what the outcome looks like. So that's kind of the operator interface. I will mention two things. First of all, we actually see the line blurring between the operator and the end user. And so we actually have, like I mentioned, the fact that you can trigger workflows over Slack makes it very comfortable because you can, operators that need to do something can essentially do that over Slack, while on the road. And so, that's very convenient. So that's where the operator is actually becoming the end user of Kubiya as well. And then the last thing that we're going to be introducing shortly, I talked a little bit about generative AI and the ability to create workflows. One of the things we're testing right now is the ability for end users, when they try to trigger something and there's no existing workflow, to actually generate workflow on the fly. And then the operator can decide if they approve that workflow or not. And so that way, again, the effort that's required from the operator, to increase the level of automation is even further decreased because these workflows will get generated based on user demand.
Really cool. I want to come back to that generative AI and what's possible. But before that, I want to ask about something that you just mentioned, which is permissions are defined in Slack. You said something on those lines. And so I want to just dig into that and,
Yeah.
talk about security and permissions, IAM, how they work. So, considering, Slack is a big part of this, the provisioning happens through Slack. A lot of big companies would kind of find that a bit, of a scary thing to think of, because they typically think of Slack as, everyone's having informal conversations about, well, work, but still it's,
Yeah.
it kind of has that informal feel. So, especially if it's a huge enterprise that, has policies in place and set processes so that nothing goes wrong with security, highly regulated, industries, those kind of organizations, what would your response be to them when they say that, if security depends on Slack, that, that's not going to go down well with my boss? How do I explain that? What would be a response to them?
So the short answer is that we integrate with most common IDPs, and so so again, you can have a unique identification of each and every user and apply his policy, the policy that's defined in the IDP.
Okay.
I actually find that to be I think they actually like the policies that are defined, through Slack, because typically IDPs don't get to, they're not necessarily, the level of granularity is not such that I can get down to the specific action that someone is doing on, a specific resource and maybe even on a specific cluster. And it's definitely not, time-based. And so again, if I'm, something that I hear very frequently is, let's say I need a temporary access to a certain system, then today, conversation would typically go over Jira. It would take 24, 48 hours, for someone on the DevOps team to get to that. Then he has to assign that ticket to another person on the security team because that person doesn't really have access to the system. And so they would need to give access, and then someone would need to remember to remove that access after a while. Mm-hmm. Again, very cumbersome, very lengthy. The fact that there's a workflow that gets triggered, and I know what that workflow does, and so again, I'm aware of the specific action that the user wants to perform. I'm aware of the context and the time that he wants to perform that action. Kubiya can again manage the TTL, and so it can revert back the permissions after 5-10 minutes, etc. And I'm also aware of what resource he wants to do that on, even down to the specific, again, cluster that he's trying to get access to. That level of granularity typically doesn't exist inside an IDP because again, they're not designed to support engineering platforms. And so I think a lot of the security folks that I talk to actually like the fact that there's a higher level of granularity, that there's awareness of the actions that are being performed and the resources that are being tapped into. And lastly, by the way, one of the cool things that I can do or that the operators can do is they can define a workflow that at the end of that workflow, there's an approval process where, someone else needs to approve that the execution of that workflow. And, last but not least, there's audit trail to everything that's happening. So I can always go back to a specific action or a specific request, and it will have an ID, and I will know exactly who triggered that action or, who approved that the permission and why, what was the reason. And so again, there's audit trail to everything. And I find that security people really like that. I can tell you literally today, I had a conversation that actually started with the CISO inside pretty large company. And so, yeah.
All right. Okay. Yeah, I think that's quite interesting. I think there's it's good to know that it integrates with some of the IAM and the authentication authorization services that are out there, and I think that is already being used by a lot of these organizations. So that's great, and great to see that there are so many checks and balances in place as well. So we spoke about how AI is great at creating really complex infrastructure much faster than humans can. What about once this infrastructure is created, the resources are created, and it's running in your cloud somewhere? Uh, does AI help you manage it better, optimize it better, watch for stuff that perhaps is a vulnerability? Any of those things that Kubiya does using AI?
Yeah, so I mentioned first thing, you can create workflows that are webhook based. And so again, if certain events happen in the system, a basic thing that Kubiya can do is it can notify a certain channel and also, populate the logs into that channel.
Mm-hmm.
So it already takes one step further. And honestly, I can define in that workflow, doing basic troubleshooting and getting all the information accessible inside the channel, so that even if I'm on the go, I can, see all the logs without, the need for a terminal. And then we can also suggest certain workflows. We are in the process of also being able to make the logs more accessible to, users which are not power users. And so, we hear very strongly feedback around, hey, my users don't really know how to read Jenkins logs because they're endless and they're complex. And so, we can actually say to someone, hey, based on the log, it looks like this piece of infrastructure wasn't provisioned, and would you like to try again, or something like that? Or you don't have permission to do such and such, would you like to request permission? So again, Kubiya can help users stay one step ahead of what they're trying to do.
All right, really cool. So we're winding down here. Last few questions, but yeah, I just want to talk a bit more about the impact that AI has on teams, and just the team members, the kind of team setup. And some people probably fear that AI is going to replace their job. And so I don't know if you come across that question when you speak to your prospects and customers. Will Kubiya do the job of my junior DevOps guy or something? Well, what are your views on that? Just the impact of AI on DevOps. Just your views on that.
Yeah, first of all, I'm wondering if at some point, there's going to be two bots, operated by AI that's going to converse instead of you and me.
That's true. We'll watch totally AI
Yeah, I mean,
podcasts.
I think there's the short answer is I think it's going to make us more productive, and but I don't think it's going to necessarily replace people. I think there's still a level of oversight that a person that has feelings and can think and can has historical contextual that has a history and some context that a machine does not have is required for most jobs.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that in our case there's going to be, I mean, you can do more with less, and so I can definitely see. I mean, all the DevOps people that I talk to, they're busy and they're crazy. They have a crazy day, and like you said, requests come at different at weird times in the day, and I think what we're going to do is we're going to free up a lot of their time so they can focus on what's really important, on the things that on planning, on on production, and on building better scalability and better monitoring, and maybe more audit trail and things that they don't get around to do today. So yeah, I think it's gonna. I mean, I'm saying it right now. It's making the day much more predictable and less context switching, and you finish your day and you don't feel like I just ran a marathon or did Ironman or something like that. So I think it's
Yeah.
going to create a much more balanced, and I don't want to use the word peaceful, but yeah, definitely a more balanced work environment.
All right. Yeah, that is definitely a positive take on it. Not to think of AI as competition, but more as your helper or your assistant or helping you get stuff done.
Exactly. I also think that most people don't really enjoy 5 times a week giving access to someone to a certain system, and then
Yeah.
retrieving that access, or helping someone every day, helping someone else in the organization debug a configuration file, or getting the same questions about a certain error or a certain security policy. And so I think it's actually going to make the day much more much more joyful, because it's gonna they'll have bandwidth to focus on the things that they enjoy and the things that are much more strategic and require more thinking, as opposed to like the repetitive boring stuff that's they don't really enjoy doing, but someone has to do that.
Yeah. And what was it like, just last two questions, second last question on this is, just what was it like integrating AI into the Kubiya product? What approach did you guys take? Did you build something on your own from scratch, or did you get an off-the-shelf AI service integrated in? And what were some of the major decisions along the way of just building AI into Kubiya?
Yeah, I think probably a great question for Shaked, our CTO. I can tell you, just kind of from the surface and the pieces that I'm familiar with is we leveraged a lot of open source, not ChatGPT, but all kinds of more DevOps specific open source projects. And we just had to train that model with a lot of our kind of our DSL and our internal scripting language. I think we're still at the beginning of the journey, and so I think there's definitely an opportunity to tap into knowledge management systems like Confluence and like Notion, which we haven't even started with, and it's in the roadmap. There's definitely, I think we're just scratching the surface on what we're doing today. The nice thing is, again, it's DevOps, so it's you already have some context, and so if someone writes ECR or someone write an EC2, I already know roughly what the context of what they're looking for, which narrows down the list of options that that we need to present to them. But we are leveraging a lot of large language model, and again, domain specific information graph, and I can speak probably less into why we chose one tool versus the other. I
just want to know. Yeah, I just want to know your approach to it more than the exact details of which tools and all of that.
Yeah.
But does Kubiya work with Microsoft Teams as well?
It's coming very shortly.
Okay. All right. Yeah. And so how does someone get to see a demo of Kubiya? Is it there on your website already?
So first of all, they can sign up on our website. They can ask a demo. They can send an email to me, Shani@kubiya.ai. I think we spoke a little bit about KubeCon before this call. We're definitely going to be in KubeCon, so I'm looking forward to meeting a lot of the audience at KubeCon. We're actually planning a cool party there. So yeah, I mean, those are just some of the ways they can sign up and try Kubi.
Oh, right. Yeah. So the spelling, in case you're wondering, should have said it at the start, but it's Kubiya. And the website is a dot, what is it, an IO?
AI, so Kubiya.ai.
Okay, it's an AI. Okay, Kubiya.ai. So definitely go check out Kubiya, guys. With that, we come to the ended the main questions for this interview, and we've got a few last few questions just to get to know Shani a bit more. So here goes, Shani. Your alternate career, if not for your job in tech.
Wow, that's a tough one. I'd probably do something in sports, or I'm passionate about sports, so that would be one.
Neat. Any
Yeah.
particular sport?
I really liked running when I was young, but I was injured,
Okay.
and so I'm not doing running anymore.
Which was your event?
The other one would probably be something in like the service, I don't know, police, army, something like that.
All right. So running, were you doing like sprints or were you doing long
More long
distance?
runs. Yeah, more long
Okay.
runs. Yeah, like marathons, Ironman,
Wow.
stuff like that.
Wow, really cool. One hobby or interest that you picked up during the pandemic?
Good question. I probably did more reading than I used to do in the past, but I have to say, like, the pandemic actually, just like many people in the audience, probably I felt much more overwhelmed with the pandemic than and worked much longer hours than I used to before the pandemic, because instead of going to the office, you pretty much work all day. So you start your
Yeah.
day very early in the morning, you take calls in the night. I actually sold the company during the pandemic, and so this was even
All right.
more hectic than your typical pandemic experience. And so
Wow.
so
Can
yeah, I
imagine.
don't have time much for hobbies, and so yeah.
Neat. Congrats on that. Which company was it, by the way?
It was a company called 21 Labs, which was doing automated testing for mobile applications. They got acquired, or we got acquired by Perforce, and
Okay. Yeah.
so
Neat.
yeah,
Wow.
and
So
right around
yeah.
the same time, actually, another company that I was the president of, called Testim.io, got acquired by Twicentis. So the pandemic was a busy period for me.
Wow. That's nice. Good to hear some good news. One work tool that you can't live without.
Zoom probably, but
Right.
since I'm biased a little bit, I'll also mention Slack, of course.
Okay. Yeah. Neat. One software tool or product that you think is very elegantly built.
Oh, that's a good one. I think CRM is where I spend a big part of my day. So I think HubSpot is it's probably the third or fourth company that I use HubSpot, and I really like
Neat.
it. So I think it's well built. I'm also a big fan of Mixpanel.
They're into what?
Full
Web
Story.
analytics?
Sorry?
Mixpanel is into what
Product
market?
analytics. Yeah.
Analytics. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So so I mean, these are just some of the tools that come in mind.
Neat. Yeah. Last question for you. Your favorite source to find out what's new and happening in tech?
Oh, that's a great question. I think one of the things that keep me busy, I read a lot, and so I'm probably to subscribe to like 15 different newsletters, and every day I get probably like 8-9 of these in my inbox. And so inside.com is one great resource. I get newsletters every day. Strictly VC is another one that comes in every night, and I like to read that. I get digest from Flipboard. Yeah, I mean, these are just some of the like newsletters that I read every day, honestly. So
Nice, really cool. Yeah, those are some good sources there. Shani, it was a pleasure talking to you. Thanks so much for joining us today and just sharing all of those ideas. It was great to see what you guys are working on. Really exciting stuff.
Yeah.
All the best for the future for Kubiya.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. It was really a lot of fun to talk about AI and, kind of ChatGPT and some of this stuff.
All right. And viewers, thank you so much for tuning in and watching. Definitely check out more of these interviews that we have hosted on amazic.com, and go check out kubiya.com on the kubiya.ai, their website, and meet them at KubeCon if you can. And with that, it's Shani and Twain signing off for today. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.